The Supreme Court ended its term yesterday by upholding birthright citizenship. The ruling comes in response to President Trump's executive order that sought to end automatic citizenship for babies born in the United States to people who are in the country temporarily or illegally. The ruling was 6-3, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing for the majority that reaffirmed the long-settled understanding of the 14th Amendment, that anyone born in the United States is a citizen with very limited exceptions. Roberts wrote, quote, "Citizenship then and now was the right to have rights, to freely participate in our political community. The framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every free-born person in this land." Roberts concluded, quote, "We keep that promise today." Justices Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Clarence Thomas dissented, arguing that Trump's order was constitutional. In his own dissent, Alito called the case, quote, "one of the most important decisions in the history of the court, but that the court had made a serious mistake." Alito adding that the 14th Amendment confers citizenship on only those children at birth owe allegiance solely to this country. Justice Brett Kavanaugh agreed that the order is legal, but only under federal law, not the Constitution. The Trump appointee wrote that Congress could enact new legislation to establish exceptions to birthright citizenship for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily in the country. Vice President J.D. Vance spoke about that possibility last night on Fox News.
We also have to look, Laura, at some congressional and statutory changes that we could make to make it harder for people to actually take advantage of. I hate to call it birthright citizenship. It's fundamentally a loophole that now exists in our immigration system that rewards illegal aliens just because they have a baby in the United States while they're in our country illegally. So I think that loophole is going to cause a lot of problems. There are a number of things that we're already looking at in the administration, Laura, to try to close down that loophole. But fundamentally, what we're talking about is fixing a problem the Supreme Court created.
President Trump, meanwhile, responded to the ruling on social media, writing that the decision was too bad for our country and called on Congress to end birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court also struck down longtime rules that place limits on how much national political party committees can spend in coordination with candidates. In a 6-3 vote, the court ruled that the Federal Election Campaign Act, enacted in 1974, violates political parties' First Amendment rights. Republicans, including Vice President J.D. Vance and the National Republican Senatorial Committee, brought the challenge to court. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion, which reads in part, quote, "In short, constitutional text, history, and precedent establish that the political party coordinated expenditure limits violate the First Amendment." The decision is expected to give Republicans an edge in the upcoming midterms this November because the party's committees have much more cash on hand than Democrats do, and they can deploy that money without being hindered by previous caps and limits. And the Supreme Court also decided to uphold 2 state laws barring the participation of transgender female athletes from girls' and women's sports teams. In another 6-3 decision, the justices ruled against 2 transgender students who challenged restrictive laws in West Virginia and Idaho. In his opinion, Justice Kavanaugh argued that the laws do not violate either the 14th Amendment or Title IX, but did express sympathy for transgender girls and women who want to play sports, writing, "Their desire to compete warrants respect," adding that they should not be ostracized or vilified. Although the ruling directly concerns only West Virginia and Idaho, it's likely to affect 25 other states that have similar bans. LGBTQ activists slammed the ruling, saying it creates an unnecessarily unfair playing field. House lawmakers have left Capitol Hill early for an extended recess amid a fight over President Trump's controversial elections bill, the Save America Act, which would require proof of citizenship and photo ID to vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson attempted to advance the legislation by merging it with the National Defense Authorization Act, but a group of 13 conservative hardliners blocked that move. Johnson later spoke to reporters.
No, sir. No, sir. We have full control of the conference. This is the same thing we've been doing the whole time. We have the smallest margin in U.S. history. We're nearing an election. People get very emotional about things, and sometimes they make irrational decisions.
While House Republicans scramble to now find a path forward for the legislation, top Republicans in the Senate have repeatedly said that they lack the votes to pass the Save America Act as a standalone bill. President Trump has been pressuring members of his party to pass the legislation, even refusing to sign the bipartisan housing bill sent to his desk on Monday until the Save America Act is passed. Joining us now is White House correspondent for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Julia, let's start right there because you have some new reporting on the SAVE Act. What are you hearing from your sources about how they view the president's dedication to getting the SAVE Act done above all else?
Well, look, there's a lot of concern that President Trump is too focused on this issue when there's other opportunities to focus on issues that are more important to voters or prioritized, at least by voters. Yes, polling does show that a majority of Americans are in favor of voters bringing an ID to vote or register to vote. However, a lot of Republicans I speak to say that, he should be focused maybe on affordability, housing affordability. Of course, last week he canceled that signing ceremony for that bipartisan housing legislation, citing the SAVE Act. But, when asking Republicans why President Trump is so focused on this, they bring up the 2020 election and even the 2026 midterm, saying he's continuing this narrative from 2020 in that he believes that that election was rigged, and he wants to continue that and warn that could continue. Now, there also is a theory that he's doing this sort of to set up a narrative in November. If Republicans lose big, he has a fall guy for this, and that's Senate Republicans, to point to them and say, look, this didn't pass. Here's why.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, because our memories are getting shorter and shorter, it's not even just the housing bill that he has disrupted, but also the nomination of Jay Clayton to DNI, which he also withdrew to get the SAVE Act done. But let's talk about the decisions from the Supreme Court that we saw this week and last week. What are you hearing from the White House about the reaction to some of these cases, especially the Birthright Citizenship Act? It seems like Brett Kavanaugh has given Congress a roadmap to now follow through on crafting legislation to codify the president's executive order that SCOTUS has said is not viable.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from the White House?
There is more pressure on Congress now. It's not just with the SAVE Act, but also on birthright citizenship. So when they come back after this July 4th recess, I think there is going to be yet another to-do list for Republicans on Capitol Hill. I think with birthright citizenship, this was something the administration was expecting. We even heard President Trump sort of try to lower expectations on this. So this was clearly something that they had in their back pocket, ready to go with as a plan B in the likely scenario, which happened, of the Supreme Court striking it down.
And I mean, when you're looking at the to-do list before in the November midterms, when Republicans are potentially going to lose the trifecta that they have enjoyed and that President Trump has enjoyed for the past 2 years, how likely is it that things like birthright citizenship and the SAVE Act actually get done before the midterms? And what does it say to you about what Republican voters want right now?
Right. Well, the SAVE Act, very unlikely, very unlikely to pass. The votes just literally are not there, even though Johnson saying yesterday before the House left for recess, he's going to push for it. It's Republicans I speak to say there is a concern that this is only going to depress their base if they try to push through something like the SAVE Act and it ends up failing, and that there should be more of a focus, like I said, on affordability. Birthright citizenship, maybe that's a little more unclear. Obviously, Kavanaugh giving that path, but there is a question as to how Congress can do that moving forward. But the SAVE Act, I think Republicans are very pessimistic on that behind closed doors.
Yeah, and despite birthright citizenship being overruled yesterday, over 700 immigration laws passed since President Trump took office. But he's announced that his party is going to hold its first ever national midterm convention later this year. It will take place September 9th and 10th in Dallas. The event comes as Republicans are looking to boost voter turnout in order to protect the party's narrow majorities in Congress. Holding the convention in Texas will also spotlight the state's closely watched Senate race between Democratic State Representative James Tallarico and Trump-backed Attorney General Ken Paxton. Julia, final topic. How are Republicans viewing Texas and this convention ahead of the midterms? And you know, I think a lot of the Republican strategists I've talked to gave me Memorial Day as kind of the final deadline for President Trump to right the ship and exert some message discipline and start talking about affordability. But is the new deadline September 9th?
We'll see. I mean, looking at President Trump's messaging from this week and last week, it seems like the new message directive is painting Democrats as communists and socialists, something he's done before, but he's really re-upping that following these primaries in places like Colorado and New York. For Texas, though, I think there certainly is concern from Republicans because Ken Paxton is the nominee. I think if John Cornyn were the nominee, a lot of Republicans would feel more comfortable with it. But that also sort of has a domino effect across the country because now Republicans are forced to spend more money and resources in Texas when theoretically they could be spending that elsewhere.
And the spotlight of the party all moving to Ken Paxton in September as opposed to some of the other candidates running. But White House correspondent for The Hill, Julia Manchester, thank you so much for breaking it all down this morning. We appreciate it.